Alright, I said I'd make this content a couple of days ago, and I've only just started doing it, so here we go. Um, it's kind of weird because I already did a hero tier list kind of recently, but I'd like just started playing the game again, so it was a little whack, and they made this massive change with the Reborn heroes, so I'm going to kind of redo the hero tier list, but I'm not going to talk so much about why I tier them where I tier them, and kind of talk more about their Reborn option, because that's like the new info. I could tier them purely based on the Reborn, but I feel like that'd be a little bit weird, and I haven't got to try all of them yet, so some of them I'm totally just guessing on, which feels weird, so yeah, no. I guess I'm just gonna do a generic hero tier list and talk about the Reborn from there. So let's switch over to the game. Pardon me. I, I I swear they didn't used to be so neatly ordered, but they're very clearly ordered now. We've got like physical bleed types, then we got I don't know exactly what I guess these two are like stun types. Purple background, then we got all the frosty ones, few ethereal ones, the burn ones, shock, two tanks, two defense. I think these are all meant to be heal based. I thought they were summon at first. I'm pretty sure it's healing. Then shield based, pretty obvious ones. I don't even know what these are meant to be. Then these ones are the surge ones. So that's kind of nice. So we're going to use this list since I'm going to use the in-game a lot because we're looking at the reborn of each hero. Hopefully it's fully readable on screen. It's not like the biggest pop-up. I guess first of all, just to yap briefly about reborns in general. It's kind of an interesting concept. It allows you to kind of further upgrade or just change your team at a pretty. I think the cost is pretty well balanced too. You kind of choose what resource you use. Usually, I feel like there's one resource you have a little extra of just because of the economy, the boss, whatever you want to call them, relics. So anyway, I generally feel like it's being implemented decent. I wasn't sure how to feel about it at first. I do think it's a little bit ugly the way it looks right now, with the reborn screen, but balance-wise, I think it's a decent implementation. I personally have kind of been mentally categorizing them into three different categories. I guess no other way to put it. You have the ones that like are basically just a buff to the hero, and you shouldn't need to build the hero any differently. Like you could lean more into it, but you don't need to. Then there's the ones that are kind of just change what the hero does slightly. So a lot of what you build could probably be the same, but you may want to slightly change it up sometimes. And then there's the ones that just completely change the concept of the hero. Whatever items you had before aren't going to work. You have to very much build around the reborn. So you call those like A, B, and C, I guess. I think this one's a bit of a B type here. Basically, turns this otherwise auto-attacking tank into a ranged auto-attacking backliner. Um, it's a pretty interesting trade-off. I haven't got to use this one yet. 5% attack damage for every 1% lifesteal and magic steal is pretty crazy. I mean, that's potentially a shit ton with certain items. The downside is that they're no longer effective, so for a lot of backliners, giving them just a little bit of lifesteal is a good way to keep them alive. You wouldn't be able to do that with this hero at all. It obviously works quite well with his active, which gives lifesteal. I mean, if I'm reading this correctly, I wish I actually had tried this one now I think about it, because is it based? I think it would say if it was based on the lowest, right? I think it means literally and. Because that would just mean straight up you're getting 125% attack damage every time you activate your active. That's without any additional life steal. So that's crazy. That's a crazy one. Um, you obviously can't. It's a lot harder to use him as a tank. You will no longer taunt. He's gonna have infinite range, but yeah, it's pretty wild. I think that's pretty cool. It definitely ups my opinion of the hero itself. Um, I always thought he was a little bit of a harder tank to use, just because you have to get that balance of the usual tankiness, and then also some damage, so you can actually lifesteal. Um, yeah, these are not in the same order as the in-game list, which is unfortunate. So I don't remember exactly where I had him last time, but I'm gonna put him as an A tier hero. I think that's pretty nice. Reborn effect, whatever we want to call it. All right, next one is Ripley. Ripley's is really boring. You're gonna lose your passive, which allows you to heal everyone, but you're gonna gain the ability. He already had kind of like 2 actives. So instead of just casting one or the other based on whether or not you have what you call them, summons. Pardon me. He just does both, which is pretty cool. I believe they also nerfed Sky Edge slightly. Yeah, they also nerfed Sky Edge slightly. But in theory, it's the ability to gain a ton of attack damage, and then also have like 100% 100% attack speed at all times if you get it going. Um, kind of cool. It's mostly just like if you have him in a summon lineup, I guess. Kind of niche. Doesn't make me love the hero anymore, to be honest. But it's a cool one. I think it's a bit of an obvious choice too. Given he was already unique with those like double active thing. Um, I'm just show you. I just put him in C tier because I still not my favorite hero, but interesting. All right, Oatkar's Reborn. It turns into like this weird shock thing. Wolves apply shocks. He gains attack damage based on shock. Um, he grants attack speed instead of damage with the active, and the wolf stats are otherwise the same. This one is really weird. It gives him like a whole new niche, which is kind of cool. This is also another one where he loses the passive in exchange for this. But his passive was always... I never liked his passive that much. Always felt hard to use, so whatever. I mean, there's very few of these I dislike, so I mean, I think it's interesting. It definitely gives you another reason to pick. I think that was maybe an issue with Okar. If you weren't doing like a true blue summon comp, I feel like there was very little reason to pick him up as a hero, personally at least. Um, like I didn't think his passive was super great, and if you didn't have like summon buffing stuff to combo with his wolves, it just wasn't that impactful. So yeah, I mean it's nice, it's interesting. Still not my favorite hero though. Put him all the way down here. Whatever, that's fine. Zico. This is one I've actually tried. It's the first one so far that I've actually tried. It changes it so that instead he does this instead of it being his active, he's just doing it constantly. Um, and he is no longer double, so it's just basically a normal attack where he can constantly gain bonus attack damage. I actually found this one to be a little iffy. The main issue with it is that this does not, as far as I'm aware, it doesn't scale with attack speed. It's got a set attack speed. So he's just kind of flipping kind of slowly compared to what he can do normally. It's very funny to watch. He's just like doing constant somersaults. But I was very underwhelmed by the actual effect in game. I do still like the hero a lot, but I don't know. You'd have to have I don't know what you'd have to have more of a plan, I think, than just trying to use this on his normal build. Like I think you'd want something that scales with casting. Because the fact he's casting nonstop, you can definitely combo that with certain items. Um, I realize I haven't even talked about the weird categorizing thing I opened with. I'm not gonna do it. I guess this is kind of a B. I don't know. It's like you could just use this with a normal build, but I think it'd be very underwhelming. I think you really need to build around the constant cast, which I don't know makes it less interesting. But I still like the hero overall, so we'll put him nice and high. He's an S tier personally. All right, Liam. This is another one I definitely haven't used. This changes his mushroom arrows to be bleeds instead of dealing damage. They can still do other stuff, but I do not believe they deal damage at all. So it basically turns Liam from a damage dealer into a debuffer. A very good debuffer at that. I mean, 3 bleeds per mushroom arrow. You can easily fire off like 5 of those things every time. You give him some attack speed, a little bit of crit. He's going to go absolutely crazy with it. So I definitely think there's potential there for me to use that in a run soon. Who knows? But I haven't yet. The last time I used Liam, I just wanted him as a damage dealer. This is actively bad if you want him to be a damage dealer. It's probably reducing his damage. I guess maybe, does it combo even better with the, holy shit, my phone's going off. Does make it combo even better with the Maxim Spear that I like so much on him? Maybe. Maybe I should have tried that out. Well, anyway, at some point, the fact you can only do one Reborn in most games, means it's going to be kind of slow to try out. I don't really want to do the special Reborn challenge every single game. I tried it a couple times, but I'm happy just learn things slowly. So anyway, I mean, Liam's the GOAT. I just realized I did this entire thing without swapping to the game view, so you could not see what I was talking about. Wonderful. We're off to a great start. Here it is. Pause it if you want to read it. Back to the tier list. Yeah, I know. Liam's grown on me. He's always had a really cool hero design. He's just literally a mushroom, but he's grown on me as a useful hero as well. So here we go. Next one, Corinna. Yeah, this one's kind of interesting because it kind of, in some ways, it doesn't do much of anything, and but you could choose to build around it really heavily if you wanted to. Instead of firing her arrow at one enemy, she sends it at all the enemies, which on certain fights, like the hands at the end, where all the little hands spawn behind, I mean, you potentially do massive burst to anyone standing in the front, which is kind of cool. But then she gains max mana based on the amount of enemies on the field. So if you're fighting a single enemy like the Dragon Boss in Act 3 or something, this is just a straight nerf, unless you've built around that max mana thing. So I don't know, this one's kind of nice. I feel like it kind of just adds to my opinion of Corinna, that she's like, if you can build her right, she's kind of like one of the highest potential damage dealers in the game. She potentially gets like full crit chance built in as long as you can get her shield up. She has built-in Omni crit. Her ability scales with everything: spell power, attack damage, and attack speed. And this just adds to that. Now she can hit everything at once when she casts it. So that's kind of cool. I think the one downside of Corinna is always going to be that she's not great if you don't get her going. I feel like she can be a little hard to get off the ground. I want a couple of items. This is the hero. Sorry, but some of my pictures are old, because I'm just using the old pictures. Anyway, not going to yap too much about things we've already talked about, but good damage dealer. Okay, this is the brand new hero. So I will yap about this one a bit more, because I haven't got to yap about him yet. He's playing into this idea of, once again, that you have to have both attack damage. Oh shoot, did I swap? I didn't swap, hold up. Boop boop. New hero. I swear having 2 monitors would be great. Anyway, so he plays into this idea of, you need both attack damage and spell power. He does this funny little dice thing where he can fire off multiple if he's getting the last hits. I think there was something that was a little bit of a theme in the last update. They added an item that kind of had a similar effect. I've tried this guy a couple times, and I've used his Reborn. His Reborn is super simple. It's just a pure buff. As long as you have heroes that can give him the stats, it's just a pure buff. The dice thing is really weird, though, because it sounds like it should be good, but I don't know if it is, because it's targeting the lowest HP enemy, and it has kind of a slow projectile. I've had fights where it's just like, by the time it actually lands, the enemy is basically dead anyway. I guess if you get the last hit, it kind of doesn't matter because you'll fire off another one. But I've had plenty of times where it doesn't get the last hit. The enemy is fully dead by the time it arrives, and it won't fire off another one if it does that. Also on the hands fight, or any fight with, I guess, summons, there's not many of those. It's just constantly firing at the summons instead of the boss, which is really annoying. So I don't really know if I love the way the spell works, but the hero I still think is very good as just a right clicker. He can get free Omni crit and basically maxed out crit chance as long as you're giving him enough attack damage and spell power. Yeah, and he ends up doing a lot of damage. He's one of those that I think definitely takes a lot to get online, kind of like Corinna or Nine. But once he gets there, he's super powerful. Cool dude, cool hero. I think the design's kind of ugly, but it's based off a real person, so what are you gonna do? Yeah, boop. We'll go and put him with Corinna. Cool guy. Oh, S tier is gonna be too big. Okay, Gerald. So ones like Gerald I find more interesting because they're heroes that I didn't really like before. So, the fact that they can potentially be reborn to be something that is good, potentially changes my opinion of them a lot. In this one, instead of giving your team critical strike chance, he deals damage based on your team's critical strike chance and damage bonuses. Um, and that scales with spell power as well. So that's just like, I guess the base damage of the spell is based on the crit chance. And then you get the normal 1% scaling with spell power. I haven't tried it yet. Definitely sounds like there's a lot of potential. If you have like a crit heavy lineup, you use him kind of just early to get the crit chance, and then once you get a bit of crit built up, you switch him into this, and he becomes a big damage dealer. Um, Definitely improves my opinions on Gerald because I think the main issue I had with him is that when you get into the later parts of the game, like what the hell is the point of this? 25%. Even if you buff it, let's say you get like 50, 75% critical strike chance aura. I feel like I don't know. I never found it super useful. I feel like it's easy enough just to build the crit on the heroes you want to have the crit, um, instead of having this guy. But I think this helps a lot, so we'll put him a little bit higher. Whoops, than I did before. Bump him up to C tier. Pretty sure I had him D before. Oh, I can't even find him. There he is. Wonderful. I don't know if I ever mentioned I got my pick rates on the side. Um, I don't even know if you can read them honestly, but they're there. Okay, next one, Silius. I've tried to use this one. Silius is a hero that I use quite a bit, but I don't feel like is very good. I just use him anyway, and it often loses. I don't know if his reborn helps all that much. He becomes a backline single target, damage dealer. It says he gets infinite range. He gets additional spell power per surge level, which is really nice. No longer gets the lifesteal thing, but the damage is increased by double, and the base damage is massive. I feel like in theory this should be really good. If you're applying bleed and you have surge, like he just becomes a super good backline caster. But you do have to I don't know, it is one of these ones where you're going from frontline to backline. The items you're gonna want in him are gonna be really different, so you do have to kind of be planning it from the get go. I feel like it should be good. His passive gets disabled, but whatever. Gets a new passive kinda that's way better. I actually don't understand why the passive doesn't change. Um, it's just built into the active, but whatever. That's not too important. Yeah, I think this one has a lot of potential. I definitely want to try it out more in the future, but for now, the hero still feels kind of shitty to use, I guess. Personally, um, I really want. If I bump everyone up a tier, my D tier is just gonna be empty. I am tempted to buff him up a tier though. Nah, we'll put him at D tier. Maybe he was even C tier before, but he's gonna be D tier for now. Okay. Nox. Nox is one of the wildest ones. This is one where it just completely changes the way the hero works. He goes from being this super fast casting, squishy physical damage dealer to whatever the fuck this is. His passive gets disabled entirely. He gains a bunch of extra HP, but also a ton of mana. He goes from 2 max mana to 10. And then he gets this new active where he gains shield based on surge level, and all the enemies gain debuff based on surge level, but he no longer applies debuff. It's very odd. His attack speed is slow too. Um, I don't know. This is one that you 100% have to plan from right from the beginning of the run. You have to be planning for this. You could not just like shift his build into this casually. I don't know. I guess I will try it someday because I want to like complete the square of winning a game with every hero reborn. But this shit's whack. I don't know what to think of it. I feel like I don't know if it lowers my opinion of Nox per se, because I feel like maybe that's not fair. You just not reborn him, but it is. I don't know. It's kind of lame. I put him at B tier. Punishment for his reborn. Okay, Kiro. Kiro's always a fun, slow attack speed kind of build to do. That's what I always do personally. I don't even remember this one. Oh yeah, this one's super sick. So his every time he casts his spell, it generates 3 mana, and it also is super fast now. You lose all the ethereal damage, but in theory, if you lower his mana to 3, he just casts constantly, and it'll do more damage based on bleed still. So I think this one's super kind of fun and interesting. It's another one you have to plan from the beginning. You wouldn't want to go into the attack damage or ethereal at all. Um, you instead want to, I guess, go into spell power and mana reduction. Get his max mana down to 3. And just get as much spell power as you can. You don't even care about mana regen at that point because he's just going to constantly generate his own mana. But I think this one's pretty cool. It's another way to build a hero I already thought was a cool hero, so pretty lit. I'm honestly, we're moving him all the way up to S plus tier. He's a bug. He's a cool bug. Everyone likes bugs, right? Naka, this is a hero I find myself using more and more, and I have actually used this one. I don't even remember what it does. So, you just basically trade off the bleeds, right? Gains 125% max HP when the fight starts, which is great. He becomes like potentially super tanky. Just need to heal it up. Oh, and then he deals instant attacks, which can apply effects. So yeah, it's kind of nice. It lets him be a better tank if you want him to be a tank. It lets him apply more debuffs if that's the goal. You do both even. I already like the hero. It's not like the most interesting reborn, but I think it's one that's pretty usable. Like there's a lot of situations where it's like, oh, okay, I don't really have the damage on this guy. We're gonna push him more towards hard utility or hard tanking. And I think it's handy. It's useful. Boop boop. Yeah, where is he on my? Yeah, okay, he's like just below the top 5 on my list. It's kind of this jump. There's like these 5 that are 3% or more pick rate. Then it drops down to 2.7 for Naka. He's pretty cool. I feel like he's very boring, but I use him a lot, so I'll respect that. Put him up here. Buzz. It's Discord. Okay, back to in-game. I may do this in 2 parts because it's taking too long. Marco's another one I've used. I think it's actually really cool. So Marco's a bit of an annoying damage dealer because he has, they put him as a hybrid dealer. But it's like he has this spell that gives him shield and has really high base damage, but also has just a really long animation. So if you want to just do him pure physical damage, you end up losing time every time you cast your spell, which is very annoying. And yeah, I don't know. For that reason, I've always he's never been my favorite choice because of that. But I do find this reborn option to kind of fix that in a way. So now, whenever he gets to full shield, he gains a ton of attack damage and also does 3 instant attacks. So if there's a lot of bleed being built up and you're casting a lot, he'll constantly get full shield. And then he'll do these instant attacks and gain damage. So I think the way I had him built, it was like I just had him with a bunch of mana regen, basically. So he was just casting nonstop, and he got all these free attacks think I even had a bit of spell damage on him too, so he was dealing a lot of damage. I think it's a very cool way to like work the hero. Um, like it requires a little more setup, but if you have the setup, I think he goes from being a mediocre damage dealer to a very good damage dealer. I think it just it allows him to be a little more on par with some of the other damage dealers. So I like this a lot. This massively increases my opinion of Marco. I feel like I'm gonna have to, I keep wanting to put people S tier. I feel like I need to rethink this. If we're going off the same criteria as the original list, it's kind of like how often or how much I want to pick them. In which case, I think this is decently accurate. I think Marco would only be A tier. Even though I think his Reborn is really cool. Where'd he go? If it was just based on how interesting I think they are, I think like Narco would be a lot lower and Marco would be S tier, but whatever. I think we're gonna go with how much I want to pick them. I think is the sorry, I'm not even looking through the list again. It's gonna be the criteria. So that's what we got so far. All right, back to in game. Okay, we got Shrop, the relatively new, I guess. Bleed fizz damage dealer. His reborn effect gives him a ton of HP and lifesteal. He loses a ton of attack speed, but now he'll like has a chance to instantly attack if he's missing HP. If you do the math there, I think as long as he's low HP, he basically does it every second. But oh, and then if he ever casts, he taunts, and he's also melee. I tried using this one. I think you need something. I don't know exactly what you need. You definitely need some defense because defense is naturally low even with bonus HP. I think you need more lifesteal though. I think he just does not like he gets low and then he dies. What's my experience? So it's kind of interesting. I still like the hero as a whole lot. And I think the option to turn him into a more of a bruiser tank is interesting. But I don't know. Still, it's a weird one to use. I definitely think that your builds will end up being not necessarily like totally different, but I think you definitely need to have slightly different items if you're going for this reborn version. You can't just like one-to-one it. So I don't know. He can go with Marco. Probably similar feelings. I think his reborn is a little less powerful, but the hero pre-reborn is maybe more powerful. Alec. I like Alec a lot. I've been liking Alec a lot recently. His reborn effect is that he no longer inflicts the bleeds, but his spell becomes a lot larger, which makes it I think it's easier to hit people with backliners because like cast around the heroes, and to just hit more enemies in general, hit their backline, and then he also gets some nice stat boost, gets more max mana, which is good for him, and more attack speed, which is also good for him. I think this is like a super simple one that I just think works really well for the hero. And I've been liking the hero a lot recently. I've used this reborn. It was a good time. I don't know if I'll use it again soon, just because it is kind of boring, and I'm like trying to try all the interesting ones. But I imagine at it's just a very easy one to pick up. I feel like you can't go wrong with it. Some of these reborns have like trade-offs that could totally fuck you over, but I feel like his is relatively safe. So my opinion of him has gone up. I feel the desire to pick him more than I used to. I feel like also the current game state. Um, for I don't even know if I have a great explanation for it, but hold up, I'm trying to find him before I continue talking. Where the hell is he? I'm blind, dude. I'm actually blind. Oh, he's all the way over here. There's a lot of these heroes that they've added all this, lowest of spell power and attack power thing. Um, so having some heroes with just really high stats right off the bat is kind of nice, and he's a hero that tends to have that because you can build around max mana, so you can get the big staffs. They give like 130 spell power, which is crazy. Yeah, I don't know. I've been liking him recently. Whether or not there's a logical reason for it. Okay, Nalua is the other sort of bleed mage. Hers turns her into like a weird tank where she gets more lifesteal, more magic lifesteal when low. She also gets full mana the first time it triggers, and she gets like the Christmas tree effect of damage being dealt over time as an instant, and then she becomes melee, so she becomes like a frontliner. I've tried to use this a couple times. I apparently have won with it because I have the orange check mark. I think it may be one of those games where I beat the Act 3 boss, but didn't actually beat the hands because these check marks only require Act 3. Um, so I don't know. It's kind of whatever. I like the hero overall. I think I've begun leaning more towards Alec than Nalua. They kind of used to. I think I said the opposite last time. It's like if I wanted a mage in my bleed lineup, I'd just take Nalua because she does more bleeds. But I've been liking Alec more for like actual damage, and his Reborn I think is a little bit nicer. They're just kind of weird. It's like you need to build her really tanky because just getting low, getting free mana, and then getting a big magic steal does not stop you from dying. You need to be casting a lot to survive. You arguably need additional magic steal for when you're not below. Like if you're at whatever, like 65% health, you cast and then you don't get the magic steal, and then you fall low. You know you're gonna deal damage to yourself, and then you'll take too much damage from enemies before you get the next cast off and die. Is like an issue that can happen. I feel like this one's surprisingly hard to use. Um, so just kind of meh, kind of a meh hero. I think the Reborn change maybe slightly lowered my opinion of her. We'll put her at a respectable B tier, I think. Let's see how many more of these I'm gonna do, and then I'm definitely gonna like split this into two parts. Um, let's do up until the frost. All right, let's do that. Okay. So we'll start with these two funny heroes. Okay, this one is a great Reborn. Kara's Reborn makes it so that instead of dealing bonus damage when she does her thing, she gets She gets defense. She also gains a taunt. Her heal and her heal is increased. And as she also gets a bunch of bonus HP just for free. I think this is really great. I feel like this is almost required to use Kara. Personally, the issue I have with this hero is that throughout the entire game, she feels really solid, and you can usually position her in a way that she does shit. But in certain fights, she just gets herself killed, and one of those fights is the Act 4 hands fight. Like she always just gets herself killed. It's so annoying. Like she'll always just eventually blink and fucking die. Even if you built her up to have a little bit of survivability. So this thing where she turns into like a full blown tank, I think is really good. She can still do great damage too. She still gets that guaranteed crit. She still has the self shield on crit. Um, and kind of like okay base stats, okay attack damage, okay attack speed. And you can build that up. And you don't need to worry too much about building up her survivability. Because she, her HP gets increased, so instead of being a low HP hero, she's actually a pretty high one. She'll have 1500. And then she, as long as she's casting, she's able to give herself that extra defense and heal a bit. And get a shield every time she does that as well from the critical strikes. So this is really good. I think this massively improves the viability of Kara. I think the downside is I still wouldn't want to use. I still feel unincentivized to use Kara if I'm not able to reborn her. Like if I have another hero that I want to use the reborn on, I probably wouldn't take her. But yeah, I don't know. I think a much more solid choice than she used to be. And just a kind of a cool hero in general. So we're gonna move her way up. We're moving her way up to like A tier. I think Reborn did a lot for her. Okay, Kazara. So instead of getting this 60 spell damage after 5 casts, she gets way more than that. And it stacks infinitely. 5 times surge level, like that's potentially 60 on the first cast. Then it can just keep on stacking, and as a trade-off, she no longer stuns. So this just, if you want to use her as an actual damage mage, you can reborn her. I feel like she was already okay. Like she could be just kind of a decent utility mage. stunning. Like she does some decent damage early, in part because of this free 60 spell power. She does decent damage early without too many items. And then she stuns, and you can like get some utility items on her or whatever, like heals based on mana regen or spell power. But with this Reborn, you can now turn her into a full-blown damage dealer, as long as you have Surge to go with it, which I think is pretty cool. I think this is nice. I think this increases her viability even more. Makes me think, where do I want to put her based on that? I feel like decently high. She's not super high on my use list, but she has been going up, I believe. I got rid of the old picture. I really should have compared and contrasted a little, but I just deleted it without thinking. What are we gonna do with her? I think she's kind of the same as Kara, really. I mean, she's got the same little color background behind her, so I guess that is the idea. I feel like there's just other heroes that are gonna be coming up here later. None of my top 5 we've gone over yet. That's okay. I think she deserves the A tier. Cool hero, cool hero. Okay, now we get into the ice hose. Eva. So Eva's a tank, gets more defense whenever she casts. If you reborn her, she loses the ability to taunt and the ability to gain the bonus defense, but she inflicts a lot more frost. That's that's what you get. Um, I don't know. Uh, so I guess you can kind of turn her from a true tank to more of a utility tank, where she's applying frost and dealing extra damage if you get her defense up, but like she's no longer gonna taunt or become tankier over time. Um, Not a reborn I feel thrilled to use. I don't think I've used it yet. As I said, I plan to do all of these at some point, but I can't imagine this is going to be one I want to use a lot. Um, just not very enticing, really. I feel like there's not a ton of like. What am I? If you have 2 tanks, I guess. But I feel like some of the other tank reborns are just way more interesting than hers. Unless I guess you pick her up early and then it's like, okay, I'm not getting any frost. Like no one else is applying the frost to make this thing useful. So we'll just have her apply the frost. There's probably some use cases, but I feel like as tanks goes, she's always been kind of decent, so I won't hurt her too much for having a shitty reborn, but yeah, just kind of meh. Um, she's pretty high. I think she's kind of the opposite of Kasara. Pretty high on my usage list because I so often picked up, I guess, like Joanna and Lero, who would just create the frost for her, but I think she's going down with time. I think she used to be in like the top 6. Now she's down to what that 9th? 3, 3. Oh no, 10th. I think that is. Is it 9th? 10th. Um, she's still okay. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna move her one further down. We're gonna put an B tier. B tier is still respectable, but yeah, I don't know. Kind of falling out of love a little. I feel like I've been using Orion a lot more recently, and I've always used Atrios a shit ton. So what can you do? Times change, people change. Luco never changes though. Luco's a hero I thought I'd be using less, and has somehow just maintained his spot on my top 3. He's just so handy, and I have used his reborn. His reborn sort of reduce. So by default, he's kind of like a utility damage dealer. He's applying frost, and he's giving your whole team attack damage, and he does a decent amount of damage himself while doing it. If you reborn him, he loses that utility, but he just becomes like a full-blown damage dealer. He gains critical strike chance for surge level, and he begins dealing ethereal damage instead of physical damage. And his cast is just a big auto attack. So instead of each swing dealing, is it by default? Is that 60? Yeah, instead of dealing 60 spell power or 60 spell damage, they instead just deal your basically an attack with each swing, um, which is pretty cool, pretty handy. Um, yeah, when I did his reborn, he just fucking destroyed everything. The fact he gains the critical strike with surge Means you just don't need to build critical strike on him. You can just focus on critical strike damage and attack damage. So I do think you'll end up building the hero differently, because if you build it normally, you definitely want to get that attack damage up. And if you build it this way, or not attack damage, sorry, if you build him normally, you want to get the critical strike chance up, so that he'll proc his 10 attack damage gifting thing. Actually, guys, the original one's 4, not 3. Whatever. But yeah, you definitely want to build him slightly differently, but it's pretty powerful, and the hero's overall very good. I think it's a good hero that's only gotten better with the Reborn option. Because if you need to, you can just turn him into a full-blown damage dealer much easier. So, yeah. Okay, another hero who's reborn I think is really cool is Ralph. I don't use Ralph a ton because he's just a little bit funky. He deals this big ol' cone of damage instead of actual attack damage. He is built in Omni Crit, which is pretty cool, and his reborn is super duper simple. Every time you surge, he gets 5% attack damage, and you deal this instant attack with bonus damage. Which has, it's really cool. When I used it, I had 22 surge cap, which I hit pretty quickly, which was powerful. But you could do a lot more with it. You could get one of those items that allows you to proc surge constantly and just be having this thing going off all the time. Also, I had an item that's like you gain attack damage over time, but you lose it on attack. But I think when the surge shot up at the beginning would cause him to temporarily lose a bunch of damage, which wasn't the best combo. But there's a lot of good shit you could do here. It's just such an easy one too. Like if you have Ralph as a damage dealer, this is kind of like a no-brainer reborn. It's just such a simple little boost to his effectiveness. So yeah, pretty big fan. I think it definitely ups the viability of Rolf. It's just do more damage. Like I think in general, like the hero you're probably gonna want to, if you're thinking like, do I want to reborn a hero or which hero am I gonna reborn? I hate the way I'm using the word reborn, but this is the way that the dev uses it, so whatever. I think yeah, your damage dealer is gonna be the first hero that comes to mind. Say, okay, does my damage dealer have a good reborn that's gonna let them deal more damage? And in Ralph's case, the answer is definitely a yes. So I think that ups him to A tier. I definitely had him lower before, but he deserves a little boost. Everyone's getting a little boost. Ira, one of my most used heroes. Have I even done her reborn yet? I don't know if I have. She no longer stuns, but she does a lot more damage, and she gets a bunch of spell power based on her attack speed. And she still does the frost, which is quite handy, especially if you're turning her into a spell damage dealer. That frost is just gonna be useful. I've always liked Ira. It's like she has really good utility. Fast attack speed means she's good at applying debuffs. The built-in stun is really useful, as is the applying of the frost. And now, if you want, you can go all in on her as a spell damage dealer. Before, you could also have the option to just go as a true DPS instead of like utility DPS and just give her damage. Yeah, I know the hero's really solid. The reborn isn't crazy interesting, but it's still solid, and this is always like an S plus tier hero for me. So easy peasy. Put her there again. James. Okay, James is definitely I think a solidly interesting one. It changes his active. So instead of just giving critical strike and healing people, instead gives the critical strike and just straight up damage dealt. It also lasts longer and has more max mana, so you don't have to activate it as much. So I mean, this increases his actual damage output massively. He gets a lot more critical strike chance. He gets this additional damage dealt. The base number being higher also means spell power is more useful. If you have 100 spell power, you're now getting an extra 30% crit chance instead of an extra 10. Not to mention all that damage dealt. Like the amount of damage this hero can deal. I've used this one already. Just an absolutely insane amount of damage. And you don't really need to build the hero that differently. You just need to not be reliant on his heals. If your team was like relying on his heals to live, then unfortunately you can't do this one. But Yeah, I think it's really strong. It makes it more like it makes me more compelled to try and use him. I felt like before I just found him a little annoying because it's like a lot of you got to get to a certain point on him for him to be strong. Um, like you need him to be activating his ult often enough that he's getting the buff, but not too often that he's casting it constantly instead of attacking. Um, but this big damage boost if you reborn him, as well as the fact that he needs to cast it less often because it lasts longer and has what you call it, more max mana. I don't know. It's just a all around very powerful change. I think it kind of makes him more comparable to a hero like Karina, which is like for Karina you gotta get a lot of build up. When you get there, she's super powerful. I feel like James used to be a lot of build up without the trade off, but now he's pretty lit, pretty cool hero. I think he's another respectable B tier maybe. No, no, no. I actually don't know. Um, we'll put him up at S tier. He's like a good like hyper carry type. Okay. Okay, so before Snowy, I put Snowy question mark here because I was pretty sure his passive wasn't working. I believe that is now fixed. When I used him, it seemed to work. So that's nice. What even is his Reborn? I don't think I've used this one. Um, gain critical strike damage chance and attack speed. Get stunned for longer. Okay. So it changes his spell so that it gives like way more boost. Gives 100% critical chance and attack speed, and also gives damage. But Omni Crit won't increase the damage, I guess, because that would just be insane. It would just snowball out of control. Fair enough. I kind of didn't even think about the fact that Omni Crit would affect this at all, but that makes sense. Um, yeah, that's pretty lit. And the trade-off is that you get stunned for 10 seconds to his 6. But you can still reduce it if you've got the stun thing going on. Oh, it's by the team instead of just him. This almost feels like a no-brainer. Surely if you're picking this guy up to deal damage, you 100% want to reborn him. And he's pretty, he's okay without it too. Especially if he's more of like a sub-DPS stun hero. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And that makes him like way more useful with stun teams as well, stun comps. Since they can reduce that the self-stun for him, instead of him having to do it all himself. That was like part of the annoying thing with Snowy's. You had to get a stun item on him, or he would just like bork himself every fight. So yeah, that's really good actually. I like that a lot. He's definitely not in the question mark tier anymore. Question is, where would I put him? I think it's another respectable B tier. He's definitely takes some effort to use, but the trade-off is looking better than ever. So, all right, let three more to go before I call it a day with the first part. God, yeah, I think 2 parts should be fine though. Shouldn't need three. Okay, Zoe. Zoe. Okay, this is one I used today. Basically, you change it so that she can be triggering it constantly by just having me mana regen and attacking. And it also switches to ethereal damage, and it no longer flicks the frost debuff. I don't know. When I read it, it seemed a little underwhelming. When I used it, it was super powerful. It's like you can just have it going off constantly. I think the big thing is that she doesn't do the animation. I think when I read it, I assumed she would stop and do the animation, but she does not. It is an instant cast, as it says, um, which is pretty cool. She potentially, yeah, like I said, just as long as you have that mana regen and attack speed, she's just constantly triggering it. If you can get some like bonus interaction with the max mana by increasing her spell damage based on max mana, that's even better. I wasn't able to find that, but it would potentially make her even more powerful. I was actually hoping I'd be able to get the 12-second hands fight achievement with this one, but I just kind of got unlucky with the proc chances. Didn't proc immediately, began procking later instead. Because I got some other fight like really quickly. I got like the bugs down in like 11 seconds, and I was feeling hopeful. But no, either way, um, this is a pretty good one. Zoe's still always a little bit awkward to use because she's a frontline caster. And she has like built-in Omni crit, but you need to cast 3 times to get there. So it's she's a little awkward, but the Reborn. I don't know if the Reborn massively changes my opinion on her. Need to build her like a little different. The thing is, you always just need like a little bit of survivability on her because she's a frontliner. So I think another respectable B tier. I do like the fact she has the ability to go even harder into damage dealing though, because I feel like she was always kind of bad as like a utility caster. Because I don't know, she was more designed, I think, for being your main damage dealer. The way her spell can hit the same hero multiple times, or the same enemy multiple times by just having multiple heroes near them, and the Omni crit. Both gave her a lot of potential, but now she has even more potential if you reborn her. So kind of cool. Okay, Joanna, always a favorite. Um, her hero born's kind of interesting. It's the drakes on herself and other heroes now attack as if they were flykes, basically. They have very low base damage, 5 attack, but they do get burn at damage amp. So you can either increase that with the items that like increase summon damage, or you can just get a lot of burn, I guess. It's kind of cool. I haven't used it yet. I'll use it at some point. I think this is one of these ones that is like it's kind of interesting, but this is never. I don't think this is ever going to be like your main damage dealer reborn, which is like the thing you actually want to reborn most of the time. So it's kind of meh. It's interesting, I guess. If you get a bunch of those drakes on people, you can potentially make like a summon comp without any like real summon heroes, which is funny. This also increases like her what you call it synergy with summon comps because she's always technically been like a bit of a summon hero. Like if we switch back to the game here, she has the tag for being summons, which she like technically is, but I feel like her synergy was always kind of weak. She just gets a little bit of spell power and adds 2 to the summon count. Um, but this reborn lets her synergize a little more, which is kind of cool. Eslo. I always found Eslo a little bit awkward. I think I talked about that in my first power ranking. Um, his slow moving thing. Yeah, like look at that right there. He's got like 5 heroes he can hit. He only hits 2 of them, or 5 enemies. Sorry. That's the issue I've always had with him. He potentially gets absolutely insane amounts of damage. But he just, I feel like the way his projectile is just shitty. Let's look at his reborn because I don't think I have yet. Spell power is increased by 15%. Oh, it's percent spell power now. Instead of flat spell power, it's increased by 15%. Damages nearby enemies every second. It gains a shield based on damage dealt. Then it still has the additional damage based on frosting. He becomes melee range. Loses his on cast active. Oh, so it's purely passive. Okay. So he's just like a fucking. Okay, that's really interesting. He consumes his. And he has the shield thing. So that allows him to keep his shield up. That's really interesting. So he becomes like a radiance carrier. I know Dota terms, apologize. But that's actually really funky. I've got to try. I do remember reading this before. I've got to try that. I cannot even comment on it without seeing it in game. But that's at least really interesting. And I will try it. I think that's gonna be our first question mark tier then. Just because I haven't tried it yet, and it's so weird. Before I had him as like a D tier hero, I think, because even though his damage gets so high, that stupid projectile just makes it feel really underwhelming compared to other heroes. But maybe the Reborn is interesting. I don't know. We'll put him a question mark. And that's like an hour long at this point. And I've got a scrim in like 20 minutes, so I'm gonna call it for now. I'll do the other half later. Thanks for watching. See you soon.